Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2016 Mazda MX-5 Miata, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster base plate kit with removable arms. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure that it's going to work for you. So before we get too carried away, I figured it'd be useful just to kind of touch base and refresh yourselves on the main parts that we're going to need to flat tow our Mazda down the road in the first place. Now usually what we do is actually be hooked up to the motorhome and paint a real good picture, but today we have some really bad weather, and so we're just kind of trying to make do, so bear with us here. With that said, there's going to be a total of 5 main parts. First one is going to be your base plate, and the purpose of this is to provide us with a solid and reliable connection point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. Tow bar is going to be the second component, and what this is going to do is be the physical link that actually connects the front of our Mazda to the back of the motorhome. Third main component will be safety cables, and these are just there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. They're going to keep everything paired together. Fourth main component will be the tow bar wiring, and what that's going to do is transfer the lighting functions from the back of our RV to the back of our Mazda, keeping us safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component is going to be the supplemental braking system. And what this is going to do is apply the brakes in your Miata whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, helping to bring you to a more complete and predictable stop. But with that out of the way, let's check out the base plate. So if it were me and I was wanting to flat tow my Miata, probably the first thing I would think of is, how's it going to look? You know, sporty cars have an aggressive type front end, and I think that would be one of my concerns. And honestly, with this setup here, I think it's about as good as it can possibly get, because at the end of the day, you're still going to have a lot of components up front here. So it's going to be nearly impossible to have everything completely hidden and so on. But I feel like they did a pretty good job of, you know, keeping it as sleek as possible and still being easy to use. Which kind of brings me to my next point. Since this does use removable arms, whenever you are ready to use it and hook up to your tow bar, it's gonna be really straightforward. All you're going to have to do is take the arms and place them into the base plate, rotate it about a quarter turn, and that's going to lock it in. And so once these are in there, that's going to give you the mounting point to be able to hook that tow bar up to. So due to the bad weather, we put together kind of a little motorhome simulator deal here, just so we could have our tow bar and stuff and try to paint a better picture of what's going on. So whenever you have your arms in and you're ready to hook up, you take your tow bar arms, line them right up, take the pin, run it through, lock this pin in. Then your safety cables will clip right through here. Then obviously you'd want to hook up your other components and get them plugged in as well. So the base plate's going to work with the Roadmaster Direct Connect tow bars, you know, with the ends like this, so they'll plug right in. It'll also work with a lot of different other tow bars as well with the use of an adapter. So perfect scenario today, we actually have the etrailer.com SD tow bar, and we put the adapters on the ends, and that allows the two to pair together. So a lot of the different brands will have an option like this, so you can do that. I will say with the etrailer tow bars as well as the Demco ones, the adapters aren't going to come with the pins to actually lock them into the removable arm there. So you can always grab them separately. I can't speak for all the other manufacturers and the adapters, but definitely something to kind of think about and check into. You don't want to get all your stuff and then come to realize that you can't even hook it up because you're missing a pin. So I just wanted to point that out. This is what the front of your Mazda will look like whenever you're all hooked up to your motorhome, for the most part, you know, as far as all this is concerned. And I think it looks good. You know, everything's organized, easy to see, easy to get to, and everything else. So, you know, at the end of the day, a base plate's a really important piece to your flat tow puzzle, if you will. You want it to be reliable and everything else, because it's going to be responsible for, you know, providing us with that good attachment point. And With this one, there's definitely an abundance of attachment points holding the base plate onto the vehicle, which kind of brings me to the installation side of it. As far as getting it on, it's probably one of the more difficult ones, I'd say, and it's not even really that it's, you know, over the top confusing or anything like that. There's just a lot of hardware bolting everything together. So stay patient. As long as you take your time, really shouldn't run into too many issues. But speaking of the install, why don't we go ahead and get it done together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Mazda, and we are going to need to take off the front fascia. That way we have the space we need to get our base plate on. And so what you're going to do, pop the hood. And then if you look along this edge here, we're going to have 3 fasteners. So we'll have a Phillips head screw. We'll pull that out. And we're going to have 2 push pins. And the way to get these out, you can take a flathead screwdriver, kind of just pry underneath the head and work it up so it comes out. Same thing for this one here. And I want to mention, from this point on, anything we do to one side of our vehicle, we're also going to do to the other side because it'll be set up the same way. Now if we move to our front wheel well liner, we're going to have 4 push pin fasteners we need to pull out as well. It does help if you turn your wheels in one way or the other, you know, it gives you more space. But just like the other ones, we're going to pry underneath the head of them. These ones you might have to kind of finesse a little bit more. Being in the wheel well, you know, they get dirt and stuff in there, and you might have to kind of work them out a little bit better. So go ahead and do the same thing here to get all these out. So with the fasteners undone here, you can grab your liner and kind of peel that back, and there's going to be a light, and I'm just going to quarter turn it. So just turn it a quarter of the way, and that'll pop it out. And then if we continue to work up, where our front fascia actually meets the quarter panel, there's going to be a screw going up, holding the two together. And so we're going to pull that out using an 8mm socket. Underneath the car, along this front edge, we're going to have some more fasteners. This one here in the corner. With these, you can use a Phillips head bit, or looks like, I think an 8mm would fit that as well. We'll work our way around. And then there's going to be a push pin right here that we'll pull out too. And in the middle of our vehicle, we'll have 2 more fasteners holding this plastic cardboard shield on. And a Phillips or an 8. And then we should be able to kind of lift that up and pop it down a little bit. Now with the next set of hands, we can get our fascia off. I do want to note I put some painter's tape along the seams and everything. That way we don't have to worry about scratching it. But what you're going to do is just work from the corner, and this actually is coming right off. So continue to work it out. Looks like we might have some electrical connectors here. That's just securing the wiring to our fog light assembly. And if these aren't popping out, sometimes what we'll need to do is grab a trim panel tool or a flathead screwdriver to help kind of pry up on that. Once that piece is pried up, actually disconnect this here, so you push down on that tab, pull it off, and that should be it. Obviously be set up the same way on the other side. So once that's disconnected, we can get this removed. And with all that out of the way, we can set our fascia off to the side. So if you look underneath your bumper beam, there's going to be this plastic air dam deal right here on the side. And we just need to trim off a small portion of it. So to make it easier, I'm gonna take out this push pin fastener. That should allow us to kind of pull it down some. And essentially, I'm just gonna cut it flush with this piece that comes out there. So just gonna use a pair of 10 snips. Probably use a regular pair of snips or something along those lines as well. Regardless, so this material does need to get removed. And once I have it trimmed off, go ahead and just, we'll pop this right back into place. So we're going to pop this back in. If yours gets hung up, just look up top, because if kind of prying it down, it might get hung up on another piece of plastic up there. So if that's the case, just check up there, but pop that back in. And now we can remove these pieces here. So you're gonna have 3 10mm bolts, one there and 2 there. So I'll grab our socket and pull these all out. And get this removed. If you look right here and we go up, we're gonna have some wiring attached to this plastic piece. So trim tool will pop that off. And it looks like that's all we'll have to pull off. And once that is off of there, you can remove these 2 10mm bolts. And get this piece out of the way. We can kind of work more over to the side. You see here, we're gonna have a 10mm as well as that one. We'll get both of those out as well. Now if you look kind of way up, honestly, we'll see this plastic splash shield. There's gonna be 2 bolts holding it in. It'll be a 10mm. So there's one here, and then we'll go underneath the car to see the other one. Much easier to access. So we'll go ahead and get this one removed first. So if we look, here's the other bolt there. It is kind of buried, but you can definitely get to it. More or less just locate your front sway bar bushing, which is this piece here, and that bolt's right above it. Not a lot of room to work, so with this one, I'm just going to use a regular wrench and work this out by hand. So with that other bolt loose, you can grab the splash shield, get that out of the way. And what I'm gonna do is put these 2 bolts back in here. I thought by removing them, it would make it a little bit easier to get those ones we just took out removed. Really didn't do much, so honestly, you know, if you want to, you could probably skip this step. If you already took them out, I mean, not really a huge deal. They're pretty easy to get to, and we'll just run them back in. So what you can do now, this bolt right here, kind of behind this metal flange, we're gonna pull that out. So that's a 12mm. And what we're gonna do is take some red Loctite. You can grab this here at etrailer, and all of the hardware that we're gonna use to secure the base plate is gonna receive some of this red Loctite. You're gonna take the support brace, and these are side specific, so make sure you have the right one. But this is gonna kind of sit up in there. This front part should line up pretty close with this hole right there. And this hole, you're gonna take that bolt we just pulled out, put it through, and then simply just re-secure it up into place. So I kind of Work that in there. I can manage to get this in here. Probably one of them deals where you just kind of have to spin it in just right. Once that's up into place where it needs to be, we can take that bolt and we'll get it started. I'm just going to try to hold this in position here, and while I'm doing that, we can tighten the bolt down. So this is the other side of our vehicle, and it's set up the same way. Just wanted to give a different view of what was just put in. Then we can take our main receiver brace and line this up here. And what we're going to do is you can take 3 of these bolts. You're going to put on a split lock washer, flat washer, and we'll just get these started on each side hand tight. That way the base plate will support itself. So once you have those 3 bolts started and hand tight, we'll come back and snug them down. Now, if you look at our base plate and kind of buried up here, there's going to be a hole in the base plate, and that'll go through that support bracket that we put on earlier. And you're going to take one of these bolts, put on your Loctite, push that through. It's going to be tricky to see, but on the other side where that bolt comes out, you're going to put on a split lock washer and a hex nut. So once that bolt is in there, you can come back with a 19mm or a 3/4 inch socket and wrench and snug this down. If you look now on that back brace, the hole closest to the back of the vehicle is going to line up with the weld nut inside of the frame rail. And what you can do is take one of the smaller bolts, split lock washer and flat washer, and thread this up into place. And see, I have it started by hand. I'll come back with a 10mm and snug it down. What we can do now over here is take off our headlight, some of this stuff to give us access to that part of our frame. We're gonna have a wire connected to our air induction system here, so we'll just pry that off, and we're gonna have a 10mm head bolt there. We'll pull that off. This might be connected more in the engine bay. Kind of loosen it up, come back to it. I feel like if you take our headlight out first, it'll probably be easier to wiggle this piece out, but it looks like we're gonna have 2 more 10s. And a small plastic fastener. So this is a Phillips head. With these, you just lightly turn left. You don't want to apply really any downward pressure. Almost just the weight of the screwdriver is enough. And then we can work that out. What we can do now, this sensor here, we can remove that. So actually, it'll be this 10mm bolt. You can pull that off. And then we can disconnect our sensors, or I'm sorry, our connectors in the bottom of the headlight. So you can push down on the tabs, and they're all going to be pretty similar. And while you're pushing down on them, you can work them apart. This is probably going to have to come free here. So I'm just thinking, while the headlight is still somewhat attached, It'll probably be easier to do this stuff now as opposed to when it's disconnected and wants to fall down and everything. So I have to work this out as well. And that looks like it's about it as far as that's concerned. There's going to be another bolt right here. That will be a 10 millimeter. I'll go ahead and get that one removed as well. So the headlight's still attached. Looks like maybe this bolt up here is still holding it in, so we'll pull that out. And hopefully we can start to try to maneuver this out. Looks like it's still wanting to hit something. I might come back and actually pull that one out as well. Might just make it easier. Let's see if this piece actually needs to come off, or we can get it loose enough to allow us to try to work our headlight out here. That's all it was holding that on, so with that out of the way, what we can do now is sneak out the headlight. Now back in the engine compartment, if you look where that air intake tube starts to run, almost as soon as it enters the engine compartment, down here there's going to be another bolt holding it in. So we'll pull that out with our 10, and it looks like after that we should be good to go and be able to remove this. Get that out of the way and hopefully try to work this tube out of position. With all that stuff out of the way, we can now cut off this piece of metal. So there's a diagram and the instructions. Kind of tells you where to go. I marked that out. I'm going to use air saw like this, maybe a Dremel tool, combination of the both, kind of whatever you got to cut this out, you can go with. So with that said, I'll go ahead and get this material removed. So with this cut out, I did shoot some spray paint on there just so it don't have bare metal exposed. Let it dry, and now we can take these straps and put these on. These are side specific, so pay attention to the instructions, make sure you have the right one. But this is gonna lay on there like that, and you can see that hole is gonna line up with the existing hole in our frame, which will go straight through, and on that support bracket that we bolted on to the bottom side, it's going to line up with the hole in that as well. And so we're going to set this on, and then we're going to take the 6-inch bolt and one of these small 1/2-inch flat washers, and from the bottom up, run this all the way through until it comes out up here where we can get the rest of our hardware on it. So on the bottom side, you're going to see that other hole in our back support brace lining up with the hole in the frame. We'll take our bolt, push that all the way up like we talked about. So up top, you see where our bolt's going through. There's a bracket on it. Take split lock washer. Don't forget your Loctite and the threads as well. But we'll finish it off with a hex nut there. I'll just get this hand tight right now. So now back underneath. So if you remember that the strap that we just put on, there's 2 holes in it. The other hole, now we need to get attached. So that's going to line up with this hole down here in our base plate. Problem is though, we have to create that hole. So I'm going to take my drill bit and drill as straight as I can up through the frame, and that way we can get some hardware in there. So with everything lined up, back up top, you can take the 7-inch bolt and drop that through. So when you're going to drop your bolt through, you can see that there's a space or a gap in between the bottom of the frame and our base plate. And so you're going to take the spacer block and line that on up and then drop your bolt through it, and that spacer block will fill that gap there. Once it's all the way dropped through, you can take a big flat washer, a split lock washer, and the nut. So once that strap is in place and our 2 bolts, if you recall, we left both these hand tight, we'll just come back and snug them down using a socket and wrench. On the side of our base plate here now, right above it, we're going to have a wire that's connected to the frame, and we're just going to pry that off. Kind of move it out of the way. Hopefully it won't be in our way, because we're going to take these side brackets. Again, these are side specific, so make sure you got the right one. And these are going to sit in here like that. It looks like the wire will clear. And you want to make sure that this is pushed as far forward as possible, because if it's a little crooked like that, where we put that other bolt down through the frame, if it's crooked, then chances are pretty good when you go to drill the hole, that bolt's going to be in the way. So make sure it's sitting up like that. And what we'll do, first, these 2 holes, you're just going to take these bolts, push those through, and then on the back side of those bolts we can get a split lock washer and a nut started. So here's our bolts. I put on our split lock washers, get the nuts started, and you're going to hold that bracket how you want it, like we talked about, as far forward as you can. And while you're holding it, we'll come back and snug these down so it stays in place. So with that tight, now we can use this as a guide, the hole up here, for our drill bit, and we're going to drill straight through the whole frame. With the hole drilled, take your 5-inch bolt and your Loctite, run that through to the other side. Then on the other side, we can get on our flat washer, split lock washer, and nut. Then once we have that hand tight, we can come back and snug it down. Now at this point, once all the bolts are in and snugged down, we can come back with a torque wrench and tighten down all of the hardware to the amount specified in the instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can always grab one here at etrailer, or a lot of times you go to your local auto parts store and they'll have one there available you can rent. So once everything is torqued, you can put your headlight and your air tube back in the opposite way that you removed it. And from here, it would be a great time to install any of your other flat towing components, like wiring and your braking system. And I say that because with the front fascia off, you just have a lot more room to work. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And then once we're done, we can trim the fascia out and put it back on. If you're not installing those components or you already have them in place, you would simply just reference your instructions. They'll tell you where you need to trim to allow access to the base plate, and then you put the fascia back together. So now with all of our flat towing components on and installed, we can come back to our fascia, and we are going to have to trim it out some like we talked about. So I referenced the diagram, the instructions, and just kind of drew out where we're going to cut. This is kind of an odd shape. I'm going to use a small little saw like this, could probably use a Dremel tool, or, you know, maybe some type of routing type drill bit or a hole saw, something. You'd come up with something, I'm sure. So what I'm gonna do is just very carefully cut the shape out here. So once that's cut out, you can do the same thing on the other side. And then if you want, you can always come back with a file or razor edge or sandpaper, something like that, and kind of clean these edges up. So now with our fascia trimmed, we can reinstall it the opposite way that we removed it. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster base plate kit with removable arms on our 2016 Mazda MX-5 Miata.